Greetings and welcome to another round of MTGA Tasting Notes. We are diving into our 2023 fall wine release, and we have three wines that we're going to be getting into over the course of a few videos here. The first of which is our flagship. We got to talk a little bit about Merlot because that is what we do and what we've been doing best for about 14 years now. Hard to believe that we're coming up on a decade and a half of making this particular wine. Now, we've talked a lot about 2020 as a vintage over the last few years. In fact, we've released a little bit of wine that we were able to make already in the form of our red blend, some Cabernet, a little bit of Pinot Noir. The Merlot is typically the last thing to come around. It requires a full 3 years of aging. As is tradition for us, it maybe sees about 20 to 30% new oak. Once it does get bottled up, it takes another full year of aging in bottle before it is finally ready to rock and roll. And now that this is 3 years old officially, it's time to get it out into the world. Now, before I get too far into these tasting notes, I do want to let you know that this wine, because of the limited availability of it, just given what the 2020 season was for us out here with the fires that rolled through the area, we were only able to make 2 barrels of this wine. Because of that, it is currently a wine club exclusive. For those of you that are in our wine club, you'll be receiving this or have the ability to purchase this in the fall of 2023. If you're not in our wine club, there are plenty of options to dive right into it. You can head to our website, mtgawines.com. There's a little link at the top for our wine club as well as our allocation list. That'll give you a few more details on what it will be to acquire this wine just because of the limited availability of it. Given that, I still want to go into the tasting notes a little bit, give you a little bit more of a background on what went into making this wine, because it's something that frankly I love geeking out about, and I feel like sharing a little bit more information about our production techniques is good for you guys to know a little bit more about. So without further ado, let's get into it, shall we? Now, I've probably belabored the point for those of you that have done, really tuned into our tasting notes. You know about the fires in 2020. You know how they swept through the area. Very luckily enough, we were able to still make about 300 cases of wine. About half of that actually was Pinot Noir because that was harvested well before the fire started. Merlot and Cabernet, just fractions of what we would normally produce, unfortunately. And given that, we only had maybe about 4 barrels of Merlot when it was all said and done. Some of that went into our red blend, a little bit into our single barrel program, as many of you are fans of that. And then the last little bit we were able to utilize for our Napa Valley Merlot. Now, the interesting thing about 2020 is that leading up to those fires that swept through the area, it was looking like it was gonna be a really solid year. So the fruit was actually in pretty good condition despite the fires that were coming in. The only thing we really had to worry about was whether or not the smoke in the air was gonna have an effect on the wine. Very luckily enough, that was a non-issue for us. We took a lot of precautions in terms of washing off our fruit, pressing the grapes very, very gently after fermentation. We did run lab tests and got kind of the official chemistry results just to make sure there wouldn't be any issues, and the end result is a beautiful wine that many of you have come to know and love as one of our favorite releases every year. Now, it's got a very typical MTGA Merlot nose, and what I mean by that, it's got that really bright kind of red going into darker fruit characteristics. Think of like your, big raspberries into blackberries and black cherries, things of that nature. There's a little bit of that barrel spice hanging around, just a little bit, and very typical of our Merlot. We're fairly light-handed on the new oak side of things because I don't want to really beat this thing to death and have it taste like a 2x4. That's what I actively try and avoid with any of our wines when it comes to using new barrels, but specifically Merlot. Merlot can be such a plush and sexy variety as it is. There's no need to go big or go home with it all the time. That's what our single barrel Merlot is for, because that can actually stand up to a lot of that new oak. This guy, we really want to be that kind of less frills, still very complex, still very tasty, but something that you can kind of open up at a moment's notice, and it can just be a crushable red wine. Whoever you're entertaining that particular evening, if you're just putting your feet up and need a glass of wine to watch the game, whatever the case may be. So that's really the stylistic consideration I take into our Napa Valley Merlot, is just being that light enough to knock it down, solid red wine for any occasion. Now, what's interesting is that in 2020, it has that really nice bright red fruit characteristic, and the tannin is still pretty structured. It's still a nice, got great body, great structure to it. It's not that flabby, juicy fruit kind of Merlot that you typically find out and about, which of course is something I've been trying to battle for years. It's very hard to make Merlot interesting because of that. It kind of naturally can be very plush and very fruit driven, so you have to find ways to keep that structure hanging about. A combination of our barrel selection and when we harvest really plays a big role in that. And it's still something that surprises me really to this day, is that how great the 2020s are showing, given the challenges of that year for all of us, realistically. The one thing that really stands out about this wine, where it's at right now versus, say, prior vintages, is that it has this like little touch of chocolatey notes that have kind of popped up here and there, and that's really a result of our barrel program. Over the last really close to 10 years, we've been dialing in our barrel program every single year. It's kind of the biggest thing that we've been making tweaks on. And now that we're at a point over the last few years where it's lined up, we are getting the barrels we want to be using, we're integrating certain things that we weren't able to before just because of the expense of it, especially in the early days. But you're starting to see these wines really flesh out in a beautiful way because we're actually able to do what we want, and we're not having to nickel and dime ourselves and we're not hamstrung by that. Luckily enough, we're able to really have been able to invest more into our barrel program, specifically in our winemaking techniques, to make sure that we're creating kind of the best, most complex wine that we can every year, and do it the way we want, rather than having to have a hand tied behind our back and do the best we can. It's been a very big change since 2018 and 2019. That's really been the big shift in our winemaking program, is really dialing that in. And this Merlot has that in spades. It's in a really beautiful spot right now. It can be a wine that if you're into hanging on to wine, you don't need to be in a hurry to drink this. This is easily gonna last that 15 plus year range. So if you're a wine geek like me and you like old wines, have at it. Otherwise, feel free to pop this bottle open, give it a shot, because it's yummy right now. You do not have to be afraid of opening this wine. You can dive into it whenever you like. So we're gonna get in the next couple wines, the next couple of videos. There'll be links to those in the corner. They're probably popping up here any minute. Please make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more tasting notes, cellar updates, harvest updates, all the good stuff. You can also head to our website for a little bit more information, of course, on all of our available wines, and be sure to check out that wine club information if you are unable to find this wine in our wine shop. That will be why. It's because it's only heading out to the wine club because of the small production of it. So we have to, shamelessly self-promote where we can. But thank you so much for tuning in. We're gonna get into our red blend next, the Repechage red blend. So stay tuned for the next video, and we'll be right back.